Welcome to Criterion's The Future of Work series. We're very excited to have you with us. You have an incredible background. I'm going to let you introduce yourself because your background is so extensive. So can you tell us a little bit about your past experience as a CEO and what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, I've had the good fortune to lead 7 different businesses in my life, everything from a $1 million startup to a $2 billion global business, and pretty much everything in between, in private companies and public companies both. And so done a lot of different things. And then for the last couple of years, I have been coaching CEOs. And I have 17 clients that I work with. And so I get to see CEOs facing opportunities and challenges across a wide spectrum of industries and sizes and capabilities and different situations. And so it's kind of an interesting vantage point, particularly now as we've gone through this COVID experience, et cetera, and seeing how things are progressing.
I'm going to start with the first topic, which is employee engagement. And we're going to just take you through a couple of questions. Feel free to add anything, to go beyond the scope of the question. Your feedback is and your perspective are very, very valuable to us. So feel free to take it wherever you want. With employee engagement, how would you say that you would motivate and keep employees engaged?
Well, I think the number one key thing is communication.
Okay.
And I would just say it's communicate, communicate, communicate. And I would say during this time of COVID with remote workers, et cetera, the need for communication has even risen even higher because there isn't the normal chatting in the office, in the hallway, and that sort of thing. And so, so communication is number one. I would also say that it's very important to understand that I think all the surveys show that the number one place an employee wants to get their information is from their direct manager.
Okay.
And so making sure all of the frontline managers are armed with the kinds of information and tools and skills to make sure they're driving employee engagement is very important. I think a lot of times you see leaders think, well, they just need to give the big speeches and the big town halls. Mm-hmm. That's a piece of the puzzle. People want to have confidence in the leaders that are driving the organization, but particularly in organizations where there's multiple layers, they want to make sure that they want to get the same message from their direct manager that they're getting from the leadership. So one of the things we used to always do is when we were particularly in times of challenge or turmoil, is in addition to having the town halls, we'd have a special session with the leadership, just with all the managers, to let them ask all the questions they're getting asked, to compare notes, to help them be as successful as they can be, because they need to not only hear what's going on, but they need to know how to answer the questions they're getting from their employees. So making sure that direct management connection is as positive as possible. And then I think the second area to me is to make sure we're being as transparent as possible about what's going on with this communication. Whenever there's a void in information, employees will make up the answer, and it's almost always worse than reality. And so making sure that they have as much information, we're being transparent. They know if the business is struggling. There's no reason to pretend it's not. If it is, let's all get on the same page and figure out how we're going to get it fixed. By the same token, if business is going great, let's celebrate. Let's make sure we're pointing out the things that are going well so that there's a balance between the challenges and the fun and success that the business is creating. So those are a couple of thoughts I think about employee engagement that are important.
Are there some companies that you might label as very active and innovative that we could take as an example or discuss so that we can learn from them?
I don't know that I have a particular list of people, companies that have done it. I think there's a lot of them that are written up in the various, things that you see online, et cetera. But I think you can begin to kind of get a sense for, the ones that are better at it than others, because you see it in their turnover rates. You see it in, people staying. A lot of times management seems to think it's a money problem. People want to get paid more. Sure, everybody wants to get paid more, but money really isn't the thing that really keeps people connected and glued to the company. it's a tighter bond that is not about money. It's about feeling like they're a part of something, feeling like there's a vision to go someplace, feeling like you're on track to create something, feeling like you're valued. All of those things, frankly, I think rank higher than money. And I think money is just a temporary solution when it is deployed.
Definitely. So in light of that response, it's more than just a salary and it's about a culture. Are there some best practices beyond communication, but some best practices that you might recommend to a company in order to create that connection with employees and the company beyond just the scope of their work?
I think it's first of all, my first recommendation would be to be intentional about it. Culture just doesn't happen.
Hmm.
You want to be intentional about the culture you want. You need to, when you do establish what your cultural norms or values are going to be, you need to recognize people when they exhibit, and you need to call people out when they don't. And you have to walk the walk. If you say, hey, we're gonna operate with respect for the individual, and you have a key leader who operates without that and denigrates people, if they don't leave, then your value is no longer valid. That's the way they measure. That's the way people in the organization measure whether leadership believes in what they're saying.
Hmm.
And so I think it's important to be intentional about it, be clear about it, recognize it when it happens, call people out when it doesn't, and continue to strive to build those. And then I would also just say there needs to be a feedback mechanism, whether it's employee surveys or whatever, however you would do it. I used to, in my last company when I was running, I used to hold, we were a company of several hundred employees, and I used to hold, there's no such thing as a free lunch program. And so every month, we would send a note out to everybody who started with the company in that month of the year and say, there's a free lunch with the CEO, pizza, or whatever it was on this date. Come and have a chat with the CEO. And it was, me saying, hey, I'll answer any question you want. And the not free lunch part is I'm just going to ask you one question. I want you to go back to your desk and think about it and then send me an answer. And if you were CEO, what would you do that we're not doing today?
Wow.
And get the feedback. And you get lots of ideas that aren't practical, but you get some good ones as well. But more than anything, these kind of interactions give you a sense. Do people know what's going on? Do people feel valued? Do they get a chance to speak their mind? Those sorts of things. And so it doesn't take a lot, but whatever is the feedback mechanism, you need to make sure there's a way for people to put forth their thoughts. Some people do it with surveys,
Yeah.
measuring, like like a net promoter score among employees, those sorts of things. But you need to get some feedback, and then you need to communicate to people what, if anything, you're going to do about it. Feedback with no action loop is kind of meaningless after a while. And so, but you got to know how people are feeling.
We are going to go on to the next topic, which is remote work, which, given the landscape of today, is a huge, huge topic that everyone's talking about and everyone's trying to optimize. So could you tell us what are some methods for keeping productivity levels high? So performance review, staying on track. I'll let you share with us what you think of that.
Well, I think once again, it comes back to communication a lot.
Okay.
So the things you have to just remember, the things that you used to communicate in the casual conversations in the hall or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that form doesn't quite appear to be there much. So you've got to find other ways. So scheduling informal conversation, scheduling brief check-in calls, making sure everybody knows what's expected of them. Everybody has the tools to get done what's expected of them. Everybody knows how we're going to measure whether we're making progress towards what we're doing. So clarity about where are we going, how we're going to get there, how we're going to tell if we're successful or not. And then, I think the people that continue to do that, whether you're remote or you're together, they find a way to continue to have the productivity. There's an interesting thing I've observed. So last, March, when we all had to figure out how to work from home,
Yeah.
you had a bunch of CEOs scrambling to figure out how to make this happen. Okay, do we have the laptops? Do we have all the technology, the networking, whatever? And the organizations all rallied to figure that out. Okay, now we got everybody working from home. Okay, it's okay. Now the next step was, well, how do we make sure they're working? Because when I had them in the office, I could watch them. I could see if they're at their desk and how long they're in the office. And so they all kind of scrambled. How are they going to figure that out? And then an interesting thing happened. You got to about June, and a bunch of CEOs started saying, "My goodness, the productivity is higher. People are working. We're doing even better than we were," which is stumped a lot of them because they were all sure that could never happen. And then they started thinking, well, now what are we going to do when COVID's over? Do we bring them back in the office and lower productivity? Or what are we going to do? And so they've been going through some learning, I think, to understand what about this has made the productivity increase. And so, the fact that everybody's workspace is 30 seconds from wherever they are in the house. It allows them to go work at any time of day. An idea comes up, they go on their laptop, they type out a few emails, it's 11 o'clock at night. That would never happen at the office. That's true. So it's a wide variety of things. And so people are looking for, what's really going on there, and how do they, so now the key is, how do I leverage what we were getting in this world when COVID does start to end and we have the choice of coming back to the office or not? And people are seeing, well, some people are good, some people in some jobs, they can do just fine from home if they want to. Another aspect, you don't have to employ people in your geography necessary to do the work. And so if you're in a high price geography, you might be able to, over time, attract people that you could, be more affordable in other geographies. So there's a lot of aspects that are going to be positive. This is going to be very interesting to see what the hybrid model looks like going forward as people can return to the office, but some jobs will continue to be remote. Some jobs will be part remote, part in the office. It's going to be an interesting thing to see as companies look at the way of holding on to as much of the productivity as they found in this new model.
Are there some technical solutions that we could rely on in the future, or that we're currently using, that really, really help with productivity in terms of remote work?
Well, I think, things like Zoom have certainly helped a lot of companies do some things that they weren't doing before. Mm-hmm. And whether it's Microsoft Teams or all kinds of other kinds of tools that are out there that people are utilizing, I think those are getting pretty well understood, and people are learning from each other and their peers how to make that work. And so I think the tools are pretty well known, but I think it's how you use the tools. For instance, I work with a lot of people over Zoom, and we do not only one-on-one conversations, but planning sessions with groups of people, et cetera. And, there's a limit to how many people you can have on at once before it starts to break down and be very effective. Mm-hmm. Being able to use I don't know what they call them in Zoom, rooms or something like that, where you can take a large group, break them into subgroups for a while, bring them back to the group together, break them up again. Being able to utilize those sorts of things allows you to make a larger group more productive, things like that. But I think it's also just realizing how to use these. For instance, when we do in-person planning sessions, it's not at all uncommon to have a full day planning session, where you get the team together, you spend a full day working on the strategy or the direction or whatever you might be working on. A full day on Zoom is a pretty tiring process. We as humans, I think, struggle with this much time on this particular medium. So, for instance, I've gone to the point of going to do a full day planning session. We're not going to do it all day on Zoom. We're going to do 2 half days, and we're going to break it in between. Just because the Zoom fatigue gets in there. And I've just found after a certain number of hours, the productivity just starts to erode on Zoom, and et cetera. And so finding different ways to utilize these tools to accomplish what we used to do maybe in person. And then I think as we start to get back to, post-COVID, we're going to have some in-person meetings. There is some value in we're social animals. So there's going to be some value in getting people back together. And it's tough to read the body language quite as much on Zoom as you might in an in-person meeting and things like that. And so it's important to make sure there. And as a result, using things like Zoom, I think you maybe need to be a little more focused on checking for confirmation of understanding and agreement, because the visual cues you pick up in person of somebody who's kind of sitting back and doing this, or not responding in a way, are a little different on video when you have the Hollywood squares of participants up on the screen, et cetera. So the tools have been great, and it's certainly, I think, allowed a lot of businesses to function very efficiently. But businesses come in all shapes and sizes. So when you talk about restaurant businesses and stuff like that, online ordering and curbside pickup, and some of these things, I think, will be things that will stay as part of what we supply that we really maybe didn't do as much before.
It's true. It's definitely efficient. These are all definitely very efficient strategies that have come in, and there's no reason to leave them behind. That's definitely true.
Exactly. So I think the winners are going to be the ones that figure out how to leverage these, but blend them back in with the right amount of in-person stuff to create the kind of the new hybrid working world that we'll see as time evolves. I mean, just think about this. It used to be people were flying all over to do customer meetings, et cetera. I don't know if you can do 5 or 6 in a day over Zoom. Do you really want to get on those airplanes and do that? So there's going to be some of it, because there is value in the in-person stuff, but there's going to be other approaches, and kind of like, to me, a kind of a hybrid model as we go forward. I think, offices are going to be very interesting. I've heard a lot of people talking about not having dedicated offices or desks, but having them available. So you might have 50 employees in an office, but maybe you only have 30 working slots, because no more than 30 are ever going to be there on a given day, because a lot of people are going to be working from home or remotely. So, you don't have maybe the sense of your desk or your office, but there is one available when you want to go use tools maybe that are only available there, or you want to have a boardroom or a conference room to be able to have a meeting and that sort of thing.
Or if you want to have pizza with the CEO, you need to go in.
That's right. Exactly.
That's definitely one you bring back.
That too can be done on Zoom.
That's true.
We've done a number of these things where, a number of clients have said, okay, I used to have lunch with clients. How am I going to do it? Okay, well, send them a note. I'm going to have lunch with you on Thursday. What's your favorite Uber, your favorite restaurant? I'll get Uber Eats to deliver your lunch at noon. I'll get mine. We'll have lunch together. So it's not the same as being face-to-face, but it does allow something that's a little more casual and a little less, official, if you will, from a meeting standpoint. I did one the other night where it was, a happy hour with, we had a planning session with a team. And the CEO had her assistant send out a cocktail in a box to everybody.
Wow.
And we made the cocktail together, and it was a very social, casual hour we spent interacting on that. And it wasn't quite the same as having a drink together in person, but it was a different experience than the focused business work we had done most of the day.
So on that note, we're going to move on to the next topic, which is learning. So would you be able to share with us some ways to help push people to self-develop with so much freedom? And, you were saying before, we don't have our managers watching us anymore. What are some ways to really encourage people to take the initiative to advance on their own?
Yeah. Well, I think as you work with the people that work in your organization, establishing a value of continuous learning is a valuable thing. Okay. That you as an employee own the responsibility to make yourself more valuable year after year. That's part of how you're going to become more valuable to us, and we'll provide more value to you in the form of pay and benefits and the things that come along with that. And it allows you to have more options as you go forward, from jobs you could take either in the company you're in or other places. So first is establishing that it's an expectation, and making sure that there's some ownership on the employee's part, as well as some ownership on the employer's part. Once you have that established, now that we know, that's a cultural thing, if you will, now you need to talk about, well, what are some goals? Well, 3 months from now, 6 months from now, from a year from now, whatever is the appropriate time frame, what do we want to be better at? Is it some new application you want to learn how to use? Is it some new skill you want to improve? Do you want to become a better presentation skills person? Or is it having challenging conversations if you're a manager, and how do you do those? Or whatever is the area, then we can set a goal. Okay, well, that's what we want to accomplish. So now it's just a matter of, okay, what are the specific actions we're going to take to get there? How are we going to measure our progress? Are we going to take a class? Are we going to go find one? Does HR have a list of these, or are you going to go find it on your own? And the good news about what's gone on over the last year with COVID is every company that's in the education business has figured out a way to deliver results electronically in some way, because they're out of business otherwise.
Yeah.
So you have lots of work going on. And so it's really created a larger opportunity of ways to learn for workers, I think, than what was available previously. So it's all out there. It's just a matter of, it's like almost anything. It's a matter of, what do I want to get done? How am I going to do it? And then how am I going to measure the progress? And so I think it's a pretty straightforward thing. Once you establish as a cultural part of this, that being a learning organization, everybody understand that they have to advance their skills. It's part of what's just natural in the culture.
Very nice. And are there some best practices that we could, use as guidelines for how to get people to move in that direction that you might be able to share with us?
Well, I think it comes back to kind of the individual planning you do with individual employees about, here's what's expected of you. I think one mistake some companies make is they're not clear enough about what's expected from an employee.
Okay.
Here's what your job is. Here's what you're expected to do. Let's agree on what the goals are, and incorporate into that conversation what kind of improvement are we going to try? What's the growth goal? What's the skills expansion or education or learning goal? And so and what I find is, if you can construct those conversations such that the employees are a key source of establishing those goals, then they feel more ownership to them than if they're just driven top down. So I find that employees will strive to hit goals they established even harder than ones your boss establishes.
Okay.
And in general, if you have employees that always want to sign up for too little, well, that's actually an indication of you may have a different challenge with them. They're not stretching enough. But and that might require you to do some counseling with them or teaching them how to do some of the stuff. But in general, if you get high talent people, what I found, if you get the best people, they'll sign up for goals higher than you would have ever assigned them. They know what good is. They know when they're doing their job. In fact, if you get the best people, they frankly set their own internal expectations of themselves are higher than you would impose upon. That's been my experience.
Interesting.
And so if you don't have that going on, that's a question is, do we have the right people? But you want to have people that want to change the world, right? And in doing that, they're going to set aggressive goals, and as a result, they will strive to meet those.
Are there some active and innovative companies that we could cite in terms of learning and that are motivating their employees in a very inspirational, enlightening way, or you could share with us?
Yeah, I'm not sure I have a good list of that. I do know that New Day USA is a company that I know invests a lot in developing their people and bringing on new people.
Okay.
They've been growing a lot. Our company works with them a lot in that effort. And so, but there are a lot of companies that wouldn't just signal them out. You talked about culture earlier. Southwest Airlines, I think, is somebody who's known for clearly establishing a culture and having people be a part of that culture. And so that's an example, but there are dozens and dozens of companies that are doing great jobs in all of these fronts. And I would tell you, if you find really successful companies, probably buried in there someplace is this cultural focus, this improvement focus, because you can't stay on top for a long time if you don't. If you have a great product, you can skyrocket, but unless you're going to have a second great product, how do you continue that? And it's all about people. At the end of the day, it's all about people. Having the best people, getting them engaged and motivated, having them continue to improve, giving them a way to contribute, having them feel engaged. So it's all about people at the end of the day.
I'm gonna conclude there because that's such a lovely ending and such a lovely way to go out. So I'm gonna end the interview there. Thank you so much for your time this evening and for joining us and sharing all of your expertise with us. We're very excited to have you with us tonight. So thank you.
My pleasure.